This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, and the Tribune blockbuster report on systemic sexual abuse inside the Chicago public school system. A review of the records that are available, that were made available from CPS under threat of a lawsuit to force public disclosure, acknowledged that the CPS acknowledged that its law department had investigated 430 reports that school employees had sexually abused, assaulted, or harassed students since 2011 in Tiny Dancer's 7 years as mayor. In 230 of the cases, so more than half, investigators found credible evidence of misconduct, according to the Chicago Public Schools. The summary of this: they were top athletes and honor roll students, children struggling to read, and teenagers seeking guidance, but then they became prey among the many students raped or sexually abused during the last decade by trusted adults working in the Chicago Public Schools as district officials repeated obvious child protection mistakes, and I would add more than mistakes, criminal failures like the duty to report. When students summoned the courage to disclose abuse, teachers and principals failed to alert child welfare investigators or police despite the state's mandated reporter law, so the Tribune reports. John Cass wrote about this morning. Because of course, Tiny Dancer is now on the spot on this. Everybody understands the mayor's in charge of the schools. He writes, does Cass, did the mayor approve of bureaucratic indifference and dysfunction that led to in-school rapes? No, of course not. But Emmanuel is a father who loves his children. If he weren't the mayor and had a child at a CPS school where predators were allowed to roam, he'd be the first to say that the mayor was responsible, wouldn't he? If you had a child in CPS, you had a child in one of these schools where one of these incidents occurred, you'd be the first one calling for accountability, wouldn't you? All the way to the top. Everybody would. The question is, will everybody remember to hold people in charge accountable when the opportunity presents itself on election days? Because it hasn't happened in my lifetime in Chicago. Here was what Tiny Dancer had to say in the wake of this report and allegations of his, executive failure.
Well, I think all adults offer an apology. I offer my apology, but the question is, what are we going to do now besides words? What are the deeds to fix this up? I take responsibility, like Janice does take responsibility, to do this. My point is, if you have a suggestion for how to tighten something up, offer that.
Yeah, everybody's responsible. Everybody should apologize. He apologizes and everybody should apologize. But now what are we going to do? Let's, take this out of politics, and what's past is past, but now what are we going to do?
Well,
I don't know.
What they're going to do, on June 1st, all parents who have kids in CPS, obviously I have too, got a letter from Janice Jackson talking about protecting Chicago's children, and their plan of action, Dan, is they're hiring Maggie Hickey, a former assistant U.S. state's attorney.
Yeah,
and Illinois Executive Inspector General. She's going to lead this top-to-bottom review. And then they have recommendations. If you're a coach now, you have to have background check and all this. They have a long list of what they're doing to protect our children now. But the problem is what was the cover-up first before we figure out what we're going to do in the future?
Give me a break. $500,000 to Schiff Hardin to bring in lawyers to do a top-to-bottom review and produce a report in 6 weeks. Give me a break.
The Tribune gave them. They don't need that. The Tribune gave them their report.
That's political damage control. The whole kind of, if you have ideas, suggest them. What are your ideas? You're the mayor. You're the one responsible ultimately. You're the chief executive. You've been there for 7 years. What do you got? Why does it take the Tribune 7 years into your term to unearth what's happened over the last 7 years in CPS? Everybody apologize. I apologize. Everybody apologize. Now let's get to work. And I'm going to bring in a law firm to do a review. That's going to make it all better. Will people buy it?
I just can't believe what went on.
I don't know if Chicagoans will buy it or not. There is a real virulent strain of Stockholm Syndrome that afflicts Chicago. So I don't know. For more on this topic, in terms of the ideas of what could be done, We're pleased to be joined by Liz Yore. She was the former general counsel for the Department of Children and Family Services, the agency that the school officials have the duty to report incidents of sexual abuse to. And she was also Oprah Winfrey's child advocate attorney. Liz, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Dan and Amy. Sorry we have to talk about this yet again.
Well, yeah. So give us your perspective, particularly your time as a GC for DCFS, and with respect to what is being reported in the Tribune about the failures to abide the duties to report, and how something like this can go on across a system as big as CPS for as long as it apparently has.
Sure. Our experience at DCFS is that schools are notoriously taking on the responsibility, which they should not, of investigating child abuse and then deciding on their own through their administrators whether or not they're going to report it to the police or to DCFS. I mean, my strong belief is this is happening in all sorts of school districts around Illinois. Chicago being the largest, this is the tip of the iceberg. And what needs to be done is heads need to be rolled. People need to understand that this is they're criminally negligent, mandated reporters who do not report any allegation of child abuse in a school setting, whether it's the principal, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a counselor or a school nurse. They are obligated to report immediately, not to have the principal conduct an investigation. That's why things like, we'll let you resign before we investigate. And that's the dirty scandal that's going on, is that countless teachers are allowed to resign before an investigation is undertaken. And what happens is then they move from school district to school district like pieces on a puzzle. And unfortunately, this is a national scandal. Amy and Dan, there is no national database of teachers who have been found to be alleged or found to be involved in child sex abuse. None. I mean, we track cars. Every car is tracked in the United States on a national database, but our teachers who abuse children, no. So that's one fix that needs to be occur immediately. Secondly, what also, we always have the blue stocking firms that come in to do a, $500,000 investigation. They did it in Sandusky. They do it in all sorts of scandals, and, we're going to implement these changes. That's nonsense. The laws are on the books. They have not been enforced. And so as a result, people need to be charged.
Well, Liz, this is one of I just want to run this by you because as a CPS parent, they released this, email blast of what they're doing to protect our kids. CPS says they're going to be beginning to conduct background checks for current employees on a periodic basis. So how is that going to be effective? They should run a background check on everyone. Start of the new school year, go get fingerprinted, fill out this paperwork, have a nice summer. We'll see you back here in the fall, maybe, maybe not, depending on, if you've had any arrests while you've been a teacher.
Exactly, Amy. And as parents, we expect a higher standard for our teachers who have our children 8 hours a day. And, and periodically, that's unacceptable. Look, the only fix is that the parents need to get organized and demand accountability, demand responsibility, and that every single administrator that did not report in those 700 cases that did not report to law enforcement or DCFS these allegations, they should be fired and charged under the Abuse ANCRA, what we call ANCRA, the Abuse Child Reporting Act in Illinois. I mean, the laws are on the books. We train school districts constantly on their mandated reporting responsibilities. Teachers are going through a course. What good is it if the administrators are not reporting these abusers? And if there are 700 allegations, I would imagine that they're triple that. Children don't want to come forward. We know that. Oftentimes in child abuse cases, it's 20, 30 years before they come forward about abuse as a child, especially in a school setting. And, this is a national scandal. This is happening in the rich school districts. We saw it in Lake Bluff, where the school district allowed a predatory teacher to resign, and he moved to California and taught for 30 years in California.
Yeah.
So, this is happening on a wide basis, and this has got to be a wake-up call for parents and school districts, and no legal firm doing a top-bottom review should put anybody to any kind of sense of consolation that anything's going to change.
Yeah, but I take it one step higher than the administrators. You have to start with the civilian political authorities when you're talking about public school districts, because the rot starts at the top. I mean, you've seen it in the last 24 hours with Rahm Emanuel, where he, kind of gives some blanket apology, but not exactly accepts responsibility. While then he offloads responsibility on Janice Jackson.
Nice.
And this is a series of reports now, just in the last week of Tribune. There was the CPS having its special education programs taken over by the state.
Mm-hmm.
There's a CPS custodial contract, multi-million-dollar contract that was given a failing grade, roaches and rodents crawling through the schools, but the company nevertheless received a contract expansion from the schools that are under Rahm Emanuel's control, and now this blockbuster report of systemic sexual abuse. It starts at the top. The system is not designed for the kids. It's designed to be a third-party administrator to distribute salaries and benefits for the adults, and so the adults cover for the adults because that's what the system is designed to do.
Right. That's right. I was so offended by his comment. What are we going to do going forward? Going forward? Well, first of all, there's a political solution going forward, in my opinion. Secondly, how about looking back and finding out all the failures in the system? And, isn't it true, Dan? All the politicians, first things out of their mouth is take care of our kids.
Oh, everything's for the kids.
Everything's for the kids. And then when they get caught, knowing that nothing was for the kids, and what are we going to do going forward? Oh, okay. So we'll just forget. Forget the past. If we forget the past, what's going to happen is that this will continue to happen, as it has for decades in the Chicago public school system, and I would venture to guess in every school district in Illinois, because the leadership is not demanding that children are protected. And, whether it's in the schools, whether it's in the Boy Scouts, whether it's in the churches, wherever it is, children need to be protected. And so many of our societal problems come from children who are sexually and physically abused, then come into the system and have lives of chaos and criminality.
Yeah, they become abusers, some of them do, because that's learned behavior.
The adults don't protect them. So, enough of this posturing, and start taking responsibility and start saying, I'll tell you, if there are administrators who start getting charged criminally, things are going to change. Only then. If politicians are going to be held responsible, things are going to change.
But let me ask you this, Liz. I mean, DCFS is one of the agencies to which you're required to report along with the police. But DCFS's record is at best uneven as well when it comes to child welfare. So from your experience as general counsel there, how confident should people, including school administrators, be that DCFS will do their job?
My recommendation is always to call DCFS and the police department in the jurisdiction where the schools are. You need as many adult eyes who have concern for the children investigating these cases. Some of these cases, quite frankly, are crimes. And so as a result, I would prefer to have law enforcement investigating criminal activity. So as many authorized agencies looking at these cases, after all, they're children. I mean, shouldn't we move? And oftentimes what happens is in the midst of a DCFS investigation, the teacher disappears, is able to resign, and then the case is closed. And so as a result, we really need to engage law enforcement. And quite frankly, law enforcement has always thought that child abuse cases are kind of the bottom rung. In fact, we as a public need to demand that these are our highest priorities. Our children need to be protected, and these predators need to be thrown in jail. I mean, these guys who are abusing kids in CPS schools, they don't stop. They continue their activity wherever they go. I mean, we know that about child abuse. Until they're 6 feet under the ground or behind locked bars, they don't stop.
Yeah.
And so I mean, at this point, it's so frustrating. At this point in our society, so-called enlightened society, we're still having this major scandal involving not protecting children while they're at school.
Right.
So, I
yeah.
mean, I plead with the parents. Amy, I was really impressed with, the way that you were advocating on behalf of kids. You always do, is that the parents need to take control and demand accountability, and heads have got to roll
All
from
right.
the top bottom.
Liz Yore, former general counsel for DCFS and Oprah Winfrey's child advocate attorney. Liz, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your perspective.
Thank you, Dan and Amy.
Thank you, Liz. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.